Welcome back, everyone. We're back with more content. I just finished day one of the 2024 Idaho Closed State Championship tournament, and it was 2 rounds, and we're going to be looking at those 2 rounds quickly, and then I'm going to go to sleep, and then I'm going to play the next 2 rounds tomorrow. So, in this first game, I get paired against a 1300, but I live in Idaho, everyone's underrated. So, let's see what happens. I play e4, we get the French defense, and there was a blitz tournament the day before, uh, in the evening, and I played the French. My opponent also played the French in that tournament against me, so I did a little bit of preparation. Ooh, what a surprise! And he ends up taking this pawn on e4. I take with the bishop, and we get this line here where I have this bishop on this diagonal. So I play c5, challenging the center. I play knight to e2, defending the pawn. Knight c6, bishop to e3, defending the pawn again. And now my opponent plays queen to b6. So this queen is now over here, threatening this pawn. However, I can just move this knight to c3, knight b to c3 to protect the pawn. And it's kind of difficult to get away with taking this pawn because, first of all, this pawn is now hanging, and I can also just play rook b1 whenever I want to, and this queen has a hard time getting back. So instead, my opponent plays bishop to d7, which is the best move. I end up castling, and now my opponent's best move is to just take this pawn and play knight to e5, hitting this bishop, and that looks kind of scary, allowing this discovered attack. But there are actually no good fossils because wherever I go, either the queen moves or yeah, the queen just moves. If I take here, it doesn't work because the queen takes. Knight f5, the queen can just move to anywhere, probably just c7, and the knight just has to move after that. So this would be the best play for black. Instead, my opponent plays knight to a5, and this is very understandable because the idea is to play knight to c4 on the next move, and also stop knight to a4 using this bishop. And I thought after knight to a5, I could just play pawn takes, and this move b4, attacking the queen and taking advantage of this kind of fork. My opponent takes on e3, then I can take on a5, and I would be winning a piece. And if takes, then maybe rook to b1, and I can start attacking this queen. However, this actually does not work because my opponent has this c4 square, attacking this, staying on the bishop, and this knight guards backwards also. So keep this c4 square in mind, because there's actually a crazy computer move here. I guess it's not too crazy, but it is kind of okay. It is crazy. So pause the video, see try to decide what you would do with white here. It's not a very obvious move, but if you're thinking about the c4 square, maybe it is. So pause the video and try to see what you play as white. So if you said b3, I was also looking at this idea just to stop the knight from coming into c4. And this is an okay move, but the computer wants me to play queen to d3, and the idea is to just guard this c4 square. That's the idea. And now basically, if black takes, then I just take with the bishop. And if black does nothing, now I can take, because after b4, black still has to take with the queen, and now after rook to b1, there is no longer queen c4 because I can take and then take the bishop. And if the queen goes to a3, then there's bishop all the way back to c1, and this queen is now entombed in its own pieces, and I would be winning the queen, or black would have to sack the bishop to release the queen. So I missed queen to c4, and instead I played this move a3 with the idea of preparing b4. Now this is a little bit slow, and my opponent can now play knight to c4, and my idea if my opponent played knight to c4 is just to take, takes, rook b8 and b4, and then drop the bishop back. And I thought I would be up a pawn here, but what I missed was knight takes b2 first. And if I played like queen to b1, now rook to b8, and although I win the knight, this bishop is pinned. So, well, not there. But the bishop's just pinned, and black can take his sweet time to recapture the bishop. But my opponent didn't do this, and instead he played rook to d8, which is a mistake because it just allows pawn takes c5 for free, basically. So my opponent can't take back because of b4. So my opponent drops back to c7, and now I play b4, attacking the knight. It looks like I'm forcing it to c4, which is a good square, but I can follow this up with queen to d3, which isn't the best move, but the best moves are all just completely insane. Like the first computer move is bishop to f4. And I was looking at this, but after e5, I couldn't figure out a good follow-up because bishop to g3 kind of runs into either bishop to g6, uh, probably runs into bishop c6, attacking the queen, and if I take, then takes, and now black has good play on the light squares here. However, the computer suggests knight to d4, which is kind of a natural move, not really, but it takes advantage of this pin, and if black takes, then I have a check. If bishop to e7, I have queen to e2, double attack on the knight and the bishop. Bishop to e6, I can take, and then the queen is attacked. However, I can play queen to e2, attacking the knight and the pawn, taking advantage of this knight, which just isn't protected. And that's basically it for that line. And the point of the knight going to here is I want to play the knight to b5, attacking the queen, and then I can go to d6, potentially, and this knight is still hanging here. So bishop to f4 is a move. I didn't see knight to d4, however. I can also play bishop to d4, which I guess is the same idea. Knight to d5. All very, very normal moves. Bishop to e7, best move. Okay, so I play queen to e3, and I'm gonna take this inaccuracy. I don't care. I don't care that this is inaccuracy. It's still the third best move. Still have a pretty decent advantage. My opponent plays knight to e5, and now I play bishop to f4, pinning the knight. So now if the knight takes the queen, I can take, drop back. And now this knight is kind of in no man's land. I would have to go to b2, which isn't a great square. And now I can take this pawn, and I just have this pawn. So instead my opponent takes on f3, I take back. And now after e5, bishop g3, I'm kind of consolidated, and I just have this pawn chain. On the queen side, I have a 4 on 2. And this pawn is also kind of weak. I'll probably win that pawn, which is what happens. Now I play knight to d4, with the idea of knight to b5, and also knight to f5 potentially. We get bishop to g4, and now the only move knight d to b5, attacking the queen. So I'm kind of just leaving my queen hanging, but I am attacking my opponent's queen, so it's okay. Queen to d7, queen to e3, castles, and now I take play h3, kick the bishop, take this pawn. Now I'm up 2 clean pawns. Bishop takes c2, which is a mistake because it allows rook f1, rook f to e1. Now I'm attacking this bishop, and the bishop's kind of trapped because of this nice, very strong c5 pawn. So rook d8 protects it, but knight to c7 removes the defender, and my opponent kind of just goes into desperation mode, plays knight to h5. Maybe he was hoping for knight takes g3, and then he would only be down in exchange, and he would have 2 bishops basically for an exchange, a rook and a knight. But this actually hates checkmate, so he can't do that, and I'm just up a full rook. So my opponent plays on for about 10 or so moves, but well, actually, I stopped putting this game in after 10 or so moves. I think the game ended in like 50 moves, but I won't show the rest of that. So this was a pretty smooth first game. I did miss queen to d3. Maybe if I thought for a little more time, I would have found it, but I did already spend 25 minutes, so I ended up playing a3 because I thought it was okay. And other than that, this was a pretty smooth first game. So let's move on to the second game. I now get black against a 1600 floored opponent, but you can never underestimate these floored opponents because even though like they're a floored opponent, they still know how to play chess. So we got e4, c5, and we got the accelerated dragon Maraxi bind. So I play knight to f6. This is the main line. I've played this a lot of times in my earlier videos as well. And my opponent takes on c6, and I have seen this played against me in blitz. And I usually just take back, and white doesn't have this knight in the center anymore. So this always sets a nice trap. There's this trap a lot in these accelerated dragon structures. White can usually never play e5, attacking the knight, because white always has to watch out for this queen to a5 check, which wins a pawn. But my opponent doesn't fall for this, of course. Instead, knight to c3, d6 now, stopping e5 because there's no more check. Bishop to e2, bishop g7, bishop e3, and now I play rook to b8. And there's a lot of move orders to achieve the same structure. The bishop goes to e6, queen goes to a5, rook goes to b8, castle. But I decided to play rook to b8 first to kind of make a threat and give my opponent basically an early opportunity to make a mistake. So I think there's a quote by Kasparov where he said, Well, there is a quote. He did definitely say this. If you make 10 threats in a row, your opponent will miss one of them. So I'm making one threat here. So I'm just trying to see what happens after I make one threat. And sure enough, we do get a mistake. Pawn to e5. And the idea of this move is pretty simple. If I take, then after takes and takes, now we get bishop takes a7, attacking the rook. And I have these double center pawns here. Also have an isolated pawn. And white has a 3-on-1 on the queen side, and I also can't castle. And it looks like I can take this free pawn on b2, but indeed this is not a free pawn because of a tactic that I've seen from Eric Rosen. It is castles queenside, check, discovered attack on the rook. I probably could have had you guys pause for that. This is a pretty nice tactic. Um, and I saw this during the game, so I didn't like this at all. And I thought this was actually a good move until I saw knight to d7, because I don't have to take the pawn, I can drop back instead. And now I'm attacking this pawn not once, not twice, but 3 times. And additionally, I am attacking this b2 pawn. And if I can take this b2 pawn, that means this knight is unprotected, and there are a lot of diagonals with valuable pieces on it. So if I can take this b2 pawn, it would be probably very dangerous. So it's basically forced to take because if white protects the pawn, I take a free pawn, and free pawn in the center is usually bad. So we get he takes d6, rook takes b2. I am threatening this knight. We get queen c1, which is just a blunder. This move is probably bishop d4, and when I play knight d7, I calculated that after bishop d4 I could play e5, and after bishop e3, queen to a5. And I thought this was winning, but I missed that after bishop d2, there's not actually a knockout blow. E4 doesn't work because of takes, and queen e5 trying to attack the knight and setting up a discovery does not work either because of this move bishop to c3. And after takes, there would be takes, and there would still be a fork. So this, what I had planned initially didn't work, so I was kind of hoping my opponent wouldn't play bishop d4, but even if he did, I could just probably castle, and I mean takes, everything takes, castles. This is probably still better for me because of my active pieces, but it is a very, very long way from winning the game. So, but instead my opponent plays queen to c1, and this is just a blunder because although it's attacking my rook, I can play queen to a5, attacking this knight a second time, and now it's very difficult for my opponent to defend this knight, because there's just no way to defend the knight. If bishop d2, which is the only other way, I can sacrifice the rook, and if the queen takes, I have this pin, and if the king takes, I have this skewer, which is very nice. So at this point, I'm just going to win this piece, and my opponent decides to take the rook. Now I have a choice of taking with the bishop or the queen. There are some different nuances to both, but I decided to take with the queen. I could also take with the bishop, and then my opponent would play here to kind of pin the queen. Then I would take the rook. Now the bishop is here, compared to the bishop being on d2 in the other line. Yeah, like this. And I just thought that bishop on d2 is worse than bishop on a5. Is it really? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I'm up a piece anyways. So you get takes, castles, bishop d4. And after a few more moves, I just consolidate my position, activate my pieces, and my opponent eventually resigns after knight to g4. So after the first day, I get 2 pretty smooth games. Now, we're now on 2 out of 2, and there are 6 rounds here. This was the first day, 2 more rounds tomorrow, and 2 more rounds the day after that. So 6 rounds total, and usually 5 rounds out of 6 is enough to either win the tournament or tie for first. But sometimes you do need 5.5. So we've got to keep going. Tomorrow, hopefully we get some more good games, and we'll be back with recaps. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow.